"Stop resisting," Officer Bradley Hayes shouted, loud enough for every phone in the gas station parking lot to turn toward him, even though Alicia Monroe was standing perfectly still with both hands open in the pale Virginia morning. The words hit the air harder than the flashing blue lights behind her. They made strangers look up from fuel pumps, made a cashier freeze behind the glass, made a little boy in a red hoodie stop chewing his candy. Alicia did not shout back. She did not twist away. She did not give him the anger he seemed to be waiting for. She only looked down at her phone, lying face up near the curb, its cracked screen still glowing with one unfinished message. Arrival delayed. Package still secure. Hayes saw the words and smirked as if he had found proof of something. He did not know that package did not mean cash, pills, or anything illegal. He did not know it referred to a sealed military drive inside the black case resting on the passenger seat of Alicia's rented silver sedan. He did not know that 30 miles away, inside a secured conference room near the Pentagon, people with badges he had only seen on television were waiting for her. To him, Alicia Monroe was simply a black woman in a neat gray coat parked beside Pump 4 in a neighborhood where he believed she did not belong. The morning had started quietly. A cold wind moved across the lot, carrying the smell of gasoline, burnt coffee, and wet asphalt from last night's rain. Alicia had pulled in just after 7, bought a plain black coffee, and checked the clock on her dashboard. She was early. That was how she had survived 12 years in national security work. Early, prepared, invisible when necessary. Her hair was pulled back. Her shoes were polished but not expensive. Her face carried the calm of someone trained to notice exits, cameras, reflections in glass, and the difference between curiosity and danger. She had just stepped out to stretch her legs when Hayes's patrol car rolled in behind her without sirens, slow and deliberate. His first question was not, "Good morning." It was not, "Can I help you?" It was, "Is this your vehicle?" Alicia had answered yes. She had offered her license. She had kept her voice level. But Hayes kept looking past her, toward the black case visible through the front window. "Open the bag," he said. Alicia's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "I can't do that, officer." His expression changed, not much, just enough. A small hardening around the mouth. A man hearing the word no from someone he had already decided should obey. "You can't," he repeated. Alicia glanced at the security camera above the pump, then back at him. "That case is under federal chain of custody protocol. I can provide a verification contact." Hayes gave a short laugh, flat and humorless. "Federal chain of custody," he said, turning slightly toward the small crowd beginning to gather. "You learned that from a TV show?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. No one laughed. Alicia lowered her coffee onto the roof of her car with slow care, as if every movement had to be translated for suspicion. "Officer, your badge does not outrank federal protocol." That sentence changed the temperature of the parking lot. Hayes stepped closer, his hand hovering near his belt, his voice dropping. "You need to watch how you talk to me." Alicia's phone buzzed in her palm. "Colonel Vance." She looked at the screen for half a second too long. Hayes noticed. "Put the phone down." "I need to answer that." "I said put it down." She did, carefully, but the phone slid from the edge of the car roof and landed near the storm drain. Alicia instinctively reached to stop it from slipping farther. Hayes shouted then, not because she had done anything dangerous, but because the shout gave him control of the story before anyone else understood it. "Stop resisting." The words rolled across the lot, clean and official, wrapping a lie in the sound of authority. Alicia froze with her hand inches from the phone. The screen still glowed. The message still waited. Arrival delayed. Package still secure. And behind the glass doors of the gas station, a young cashier named Jenna Ortiz quietly lifted her own phone and started recording. Alicia Monroe had learned early that silence could be mistaken for weakness, especially when wrapped around a black woman in a place where people expected apology before explanation. She was 34 years old, born in Baltimore, raised in a narrow brick row house where the radiators clanged through winter, and her mother left before sunrise in blue scrubs that smelled faintly of hospital soap. Her father had served in the army until a back injury ended his career, but he never stopped standing like someone waiting for inspection. From him, Alicia learned discipline. From her mother, she learned tenderness. From the world, she learned that being right did not always protect you, unless you also stayed calm enough to prove it. That calm was the reason she had been trusted with rooms most people never saw. Not because she was loud. Not because she was connected. Because she listened, remembered, and noticed the one wrong number in a page full of perfect ones. Years earlier, while other students were decorating dorm rooms and arguing over weekend plans, Alicia was taking late buses across the city to finish a cybersecurity program on scholarship, eating vending machine crackers for dinner, and writing code until her eyes burned. She did not come from power. She came from overtime shifts, folded uniforms, unpaid bills hidden under refrigerator magnets, and a mother who still said grace over leftovers as if they were a feast. By 26, Alicia had entered defense intelligence as an analyst. By 30, she had briefed people whose names never appeared on public schedules. By 34, she knew enough to never confuse a badge, a suit, or a title with integrity. That morning in Virginia, she had dressed the way she always dressed for sensitive work. Plain, careful, forgettable. A gray coat, dark slacks, low shoes. No jewelry except a small silver cross her mother had given her after her first federal assignment. In the front seat of the rented sedan, the black case sat upright, locked with 2 layers of encryption and a physical seal that would show any improper opening. Inside was not a weapon. It was not money. It was data, the kind that moved quietly through official hands because headlines could damage what secrecy still protected. Alicia had been selected to carry it because she knew the route, the protocol, and the cost of one careless mistake. Before leaving her hotel in Arlington, she had checked the case number twice, confirmed the meeting address, and sent Colonel Richard Vance a short update. On schedule. Weather clear. Package secure. He had replied within seconds. Proceed. Standard check-in at arrival. Nothing about the day felt unusual until the patrol car appeared behind her at the gas station. Even then, Alicia had not panicked. Black families in America taught whole survival manuals without ever writing them down. Keep your hands visible. Answer clearly. Do not reach suddenly. Remember names. Look for cameras. She had done all of it. She had offered her license before being asked twice. She had explained without condescension. She had not raised her voice when Hayes questioned whether the rental was really hers. She had not reacted when he looked from her face to the black case as if suspicion could become evidence if stared at long enough. But with every calm answer Alicia gave, Hayes seemed less interested in understanding and more determined to be obeyed. The parking lot held its breath around them. Cars moved slower past the pumps. A man in a pickup pretended to clean his windshield while watching over the hood. Inside the store, Jenna Ortiz kept one hand near the register and the other around her phone, uneasy in a way she could not yet name. Alicia saw all of it in fragments. The reflection of Hayes in the sedan window, the steam fading from her coffee, the traffic light beyond the intersection turning red, then green, then red again. Time kept moving, but the morning had narrowed to one question. Would the truth matter before someone with power decided it did not? When Hayes ordered her to open the case again, Alicia felt a small ache behind her ribs, not fear exactly, but the old exhaustion of being forced to defend her own presence before defending the mission. She looked him in the eye and kept her voice even. Officer, I am not refusing lawful instruction. I am protecting restricted federal property. Please contact the verification number I can provide. Hayes smiled then, thin and certain. You people always have a story. Alicia did not flinch, but something in her went very still. Not broken. Not angry. Still. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm decides where to land. Officer Bradley Hayes had built his confidence on small moments of control, the kind that rarely made the news but stayed in people's bodies for years. He was 39, white, broad-shouldered, with a clipped haircut, mirrored sunglasses, and a voice that could turn an ordinary question into an order. Around the station, younger officers called him old school, usually with a nervous smile. Older ones called him reliable because his reports were clean, his arrests were steady, and he knew how to describe every confrontation in words that made his choices sound necessary. Hayes liked that. He liked clean language. Non-compliant. Suspicious movement. Subject refused instruction. Resisting. Words that folded messy truth into neat paperwork. He had learned early that if you wrote the first version of a story, most people never looked for the second. That morning, He had not been dispatched to the gas station for Alicia Monroe. He had pulled in for coffee, saw the rented sedan, saw the black case, saw Alicia standing beside it with the composed stillness of someone who did not expect to be questioned, and something in him tightened. The neighborhood had complained for months about thefts from parked cars, though none had happened that week. Hayes told himself he was being proactive. He told himself good policing meant trusting instinct. But instinct, when fed too long on prejudice, can sound a lot like duty. Sergeant Mark Callahan arrived 7 minutes after Hayes called for backup, his cruiser rolling into the lot without urgency. Callahan was 52, white, heavy-set, and polished in the way of men who had spent years learning how to make power look boring. His uniform was pressed. His wedding ring flashed when he adjusted his belt. He had the calm face of someone who already knew which side he would believe before hearing either one. Hayes stepped toward him and spoke low, just far enough from Alicia that she could not catch every word, but close enough for her to hear the rhythm. Case, refusal, attitude. Possible stolen property. Callahan nodded once, eyes moving over Alicia as if she were a form he had filled out before. "Ma'am," he said, "not warm, not cruel, just final. Make this easy. Open the case." Alicia stood near the front of her sedan, hands visible, shoulders squared against the cold. "Sergeant, that case contains restricted federal material. I have offered a verification contact." Officer Hayes declined to call it. Callahan looked at Hayes. Hayes gave a small shrug, the kind that pretended to be patience. "She started throwing around government words the second I asked a basic question." Alicia felt the eyes around her. The pickup driver had stopped pretending to clean his windshield. Jenna Ortiz was still behind the glass, phone angled low, recording through a rack of lottery signs and breath-fogged window panes. A school bus hissed past on the road beyond the lot, yellow paint flashing through the morning like a memory from another life. One where rules were simple and adults told the truth. Callahan sighed. "Miss Monroe, people with real credentials usually show them." Alicia met his gaze. "People with real clearance do not display it in public parking lots." Hayes laughed under his breath. "Convenient." Callahan did not correct him. That was the moment Alicia understood the shape of the danger. It was not only Hayes and his suspicion. It was Callahan and his willingness to make that suspicion official. The sergeant stepped closer to the sedan and peered through the window at the black case. The seal caught a strip of pale sunlight, a thin red line across matte plastic. Alicia could see he recognized it as something unusual, even if pride would not let him admit it. "Last chance," Callahan said. "Open it voluntarily." Alicia's answer came quiet but clear. "No, Sergeant. Not without authorization from the proper federal contact." Hayes's jaw tightened. To him, her calm sounded like disrespect. Her precision sounded like arrogance. Her refusal to shrink sounded like guilt. He turned slightly toward the small crowd, raising his voice just enough to reclaim the room that was not a room, the courtroom made of gas pumps, wind, and strangers. "All right," he said. She had her chance. Alicia looked down at her phone near the curb, still out of reach, still glowing faintly. Somewhere in Washington, Colonel Vance would be checking the clock. Somewhere inside that locked case, a seal remained unbroken. And in front of her, 2 men with badges were about to choose pride over verification. Alicia looked from Hayes to Callahan, then to the black case inside the sedan, and understood that the only power she still controlled was the way she chose to stand. The parking lot had become strangely quiet. Even the traffic on the road beyond the gas station seemed to soften, as if the whole morning were leaning in to hear whether a calm voice could survive 2 men determined not to listen. She lifted her chin slightly. "Sergeant Callahan, I am requesting that you contact Colonel Richard Vance at the Department of Defense verification line before touching that case." Callahan blinked once at the name, but Hayes spoke before the hesitation could become thought. "No," Hayes said. "We are not calling some number she made up." Alicia turned her eyes to him. "Then call dispatch and ask them to route it through the Federal Liaison Office. That protects you too." For a second the words hung there, practical and almost generous. She was not trying to embarrass them. She was offering them a door out of the mistake before it became permanent. Hayes heard only defiance. "You do not get to instruct us," he said. His voice had risen again, sharp enough for the crowd to hear, official enough to make doubt look like danger. Alicia felt the cold air move against her wrists, her empty hands, the small silver cross resting beneath her blouse. Her mother's voice came back to her, low and steady from years ago in Baltimore. Baby, never let people pull you out of your character just because they lost theirs. So Alicia did not move toward the case. She did not move toward Hayes. She simply said, "Your badge does not erase federal law." The sentence landed harder than she expected. Callahan's mouth tightened. Hayes's face changed completely, not with surprise, but with the offended certainty of a man who believed respect meant immediate obedience. "Turn around," he ordered. Alicia's heartbeat stepped once, then steadied. "Am I being detained?" "You are being arrested for obstruction." "Obstruction of what verified investigation?" Callahan exhaled through his nose. "Miss Monroe, stop making this difficult." There it was again, the old language, soft on the surface, heavy underneath. Difficult. As if accuracy were attitude. As if a black woman asking for procedure were somehow creating the problem instead of naming it. Alicia turned slowly, keeping every movement visible. Behind the glass, Jenna Ortiz's phone trembled in her hand, but she kept recording. The little boy in the red hoodie had been pulled closer by his father, who whispered something Alicia could not hear. At pump 2, the man with the pickup lowered his rag and watched openly now. Hayes stepped close enough for Alicia to smell mint gum and aftershave. He reached for her wrists and placed the cuffs on with the practiced speed of someone performing for witnesses. The metal was cold. Too tight, but Alicia did not give him the satisfaction of reacting. She looked straight ahead at the wet pavement, at the dark ribbon of spilled coffee spreading slowly from the roof of her car down the windshield. "You are making a record right now," she said quietly. Hayes leaned closer, voice low enough that only she and his body camera could catch it. "People like you always think a phone call changes something." Alicia finally looked over her shoulder. Her eyes were calm but not empty. "Sometimes it does." Callahan opened the rear door of the cruiser while Hayes collected her phone from near the curb with 2 fingers, as if even touching her property annoyed him. The screen had dimmed, but Colonel Vance's missed call still showed beneath the cracked glass. Hayes glanced at the name and smirked. "Colonel," he said, stretching the word like a joke. "Sure." He dropped the phone into an evidence pouch. Then he turned toward the sedan. Alicia's voice sharpened for the first time, not loud, not emotional, but clear enough to cut through the morning. "Do not open that case." Hayes paused with his hand inches from the car door. Every witness saw it. Every camera caught it. Callahan saw it too, and for one thin second, doubt crossed his face like a shadow passing over water. Then pride stepped in front of it. "Secure the vehicle," he said. Hayes opened the door. The alarm chimed softly, polite and absurd, as if the car still believed this was an ordinary morning. Alicia sat in the back of the cruiser, shoulders straight, watching through the window as Hayes reached for the black case that no unauthorized hand was supposed to touch. She did not cry. She did not beg. She only breathed in once, slow and deep, and whispered to herself, "Chain of custody broken." The black case did not open, but that did not mean the damage had not begun. Hayes lifted it from the passenger seat with both hands, frowning at its weight, while the red security seal flashed under the gray morning light like a warning he had already decided to ignore. "Feels important," he said, loud enough for Callahan to hear. Callahan looked toward the growing crowd, then toward the gas station windows, where Jenna Ortiz lowered her phone just enough to pretend she was not recording. "Bag it and log it," he said. "We will sort it out at the station." Alicia heard those words through the cruiser glass and closed her eyes for 1 second. Not in defeat. In calculation. Every protocol had a response. Every breach had a clock. Once custody broke, notification had to happen fast, not to protect her reputation, but to protect whatever was inside that case from becoming legally and operationally compromised. Hayes placed the case in the cruiser trunk as if it were ordinary evidence from an ordinary morning. Then he walked back to Alicia's sedan and began looking through the front compartment, moving too quickly, too casually, his report already forming in his mind. Suspicious behavior. Refused access. Interfered with investigation. Alicia sat upright in the back seat, the cuffs pressing cold circles around her wrists. She shifted only enough to keep her fingers from going numb. Through the divider, She could see the back of Hayes's head as he slid into the driver's seat. "You had a chance to make this simple," he said. Alicia looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. "You still do." He smiled without turning around. "That confidence is going to wear off real quick." The ride to the station took 11 minutes. Alicia counted every turn. Past the pharmacy with the torn flag. Left at the elementary school where children in bright backpacks were lining up at the door. Right beneath the overpass where rainwater dripped from concrete in slow silver beads. Hayes kept the radio low, but not low enough to hide the sound of his own satisfaction when another officer asked if he needed assistance. "Negative," he answered. "Subject is secure." Subject. Not woman. Not citizen. Not Alicia Monroe. Subject. The word settled over her like dust. At the station, the air smelled of old coffee, floor cleaner, and paper warmed by printers that never stopped. A young officer at the front desk looked up as Hayes guided Alicia inside. His eyes moved from her calm face to the cuffs, then to the black case now carried by Callahan. "What is that?" he asked. Hayes answered before Callahan could. "Evidence." Alicia's voice came evenly from behind them. "Restricted federal property." The young officer's eyebrows lifted. Callahan shot him a look, and the question died before it could become useful. They placed Alicia in a small holding room with a metal table, 2 plastic chairs, and a camera in the corner. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, turning everything pale and flat. Hayes removed the cuffs only after making a show of telling her not to try anything. Alicia slowly brought her hands forward. Thin red marks circled her wrists. She rubbed them once, then folded her hands on the table. "I need to make a notification call," she said. "You can call a lawyer after processing," Hayes replied. "This is not a personal call. It is a required federal notification." Hayes leaned against the doorframe. "You are really committed to this?" Alicia looked up at him. "No, Officer Hayes. I am committed to the truth. There is a difference." For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not doubt yet, but irritation sharpened by the smallest fear that maybe she was not pretending. Callahan stepped into the doorway behind him holding a clipboard. "We will verify everything in due time." Alicia turned to the sergeant. "Due time ended when you removed the case from my vehicle." Callahan's jaw tightened. "Miss Monroe, I suggest you think carefully about your tone." She almost smiled then, not because anything was funny, but because the word tone had followed women like her through classrooms, interviews, airport counters, and offices with glass walls. Tone was what people criticized when they could not disprove the facts. On the other side of the station, Hayes began typing his report. The keys clicked fast. Too fast. Alicia could hear the story being built without her. Resisting. Obstructing. Suspicious. Refused. Each word was a brick in a wall meant to trap her inside someone else's version of the morning. But beyond that wall, in a gas station on the edge of town, Jenna Ortiz was saving a video to the cloud. At a secured conference room near Washington, Colonel Richard Vance was staring at an empty chair and a missed check-in that should have arrived 23 minutes ago. And inside the evidence room, untouched but mishandled, the black case sat beneath a camera, its red seal still intact, waiting for people with higher authority to ask why a local police department had it at all. The holding room settled into a silence so complete that Alicia could hear the fluorescent light trembling above her. It was a thin, nervous sound like a trapped insect behind frosted glass. She sat with her back straight and her hands folded on the metal table, studying the red marks around her wrists as if they belonged to someone else. Outside the room, voices moved through the station in broken pieces. Printer clicked. A phone rang twice and stopped. Somewhere down the hall, Hayes laughed at something another officer said. Too loud, too casual, the sound of a man trying to make the morning ordinary again. Alicia breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, counting the way her father had taught her when she was 12 and afraid of giving a speech at school. For in. For held. For out. Calm was not emptiness. Calm was work. It was muscle. It was the decision not to let someone else choose the shape of your spirit. On the table in front of her sat a paper cup of water that no one had offered until the young desk officer noticed her looking at the cooler. She had thanked him softly. He had looked embarrassed, as if kindness had become risky in that building. Alicia took one small sip. The water tasted like plastic and dust. She closed her eyes for a moment, and the station faded into memory. Baltimore came back first. Her mother at the kitchen sink before dawn, washing a lunch container with cracked corners. Her father at the table, reading the newspaper with a pencil in his hand, circling stories about people who were accused before they were known. He used to tell Alicia, "Do not let them rush you into becoming who they need you to be." Back then she thought he meant anger. Now she understood he meant survival. The door opened. Sergeant Callahan stepped inside with her phone in a clear evidence pouch. Hayes stood behind him, arms crossed, expression flat. Callahan placed the pouch on the table but did not slide it toward her. "You said you needed a notification call," he said. Alicia looked at the phone, then at him. "Yes. One call," Callahan said. "Make it quick." Hayes gave a small smile. "Let us hear the Pentagon pick up." Alicia did not answer him. Callahan opened the pouch and placed the phone in front of her. The screen was cracked at the corner, a thin bright line running across the glass like lightning frozen in place. Alicia entered her passcode slowly. Her fingers did not shake. She did not call her mother, though for 1 second she wanted to hear that familiar voice say her name like a prayer. She did not call a lawyer. She did not call anyone who would ask if she was all right, because right now all right did not matter as much as accurate. She opened the secure contact list and pressed one name, Colonel Richard Vance. The line rang once, twice. On the third ring it connected, but no greeting came at first, only the low hush of a room suddenly paying attention. Then his voice came through, controlled and hard. "Monroe, where are you?" Alicia looked at Callahan, then at Hayes, then at the camera in the corner of the room. "Colonel Vance, this is Alicia Monroe. I have been detained by local police in Fairfax County. The case has been removed from my vehicle. Chain of custody is broken." The silence on the line lasted 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Hayes's smile weakened. Callahan's eyes narrowed. The station sounds outside seemed to pull away from the door. Then Colonel Vance spoke again, each word colder than the last. "Who touched the case?" Alicia kept her voice steady. "Officer Bradley Hayes removed it. Sergeant Mark Callahan authorized transport." Across the table, Callahan's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The color drained from his certainty. Hayes shifted his weight, suddenly aware of the body camera on his chest, the phone on the table, the room around him, the morning he had written too quickly in his own favor. Colonel Vance did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Do not allow anyone else near it. Do not answer further questions without federal counsel present. Stay on this line." Alicia lowered her eyes to the red marks on her wrists and breathed once more. For in. For held. For out. For the first time since the gas station, the silence in the room no longer belonged to them. The change began with the phones. First, the front desk line rang and the young officer answered with his usual bored greeting, only to straighten so fast his chair rolled backward an inch. Then the watch commander's private line lit up. Then Callahan's own cell phone began vibrating against his belt, buzzing once, stopping, then buzzing again with the persistence of something official finding every door. Alicia remained seated in the holding room, Colonel Vance still on speaker, his silence heavier than any threat Hayes had made that morning. Hayes looked at Callahan, waiting for the sergeant to say this was nothing, waiting for the older man to put the world back in the order they both understood. But Callahan was staring at Alicia's phone as if it had become a live wire on the table. "Sergeant," the young desk officer called from outside, voice thin now, "the county liaison is asking whether we have a federal courier in custody." No one moved. The words seemed too large for the narrow hallway. Federal courier. Not subject. Not suspect. Not the woman from the gas station. Alicia Monroe lifted her eyes but said nothing. Hayes swallowed. "That does not mean anything," he muttered, though the sentence came out weak, almost private. Callahan stepped out of the room and pulled the door partly closed, but not enough to keep Alicia from hearing the panic smoothing itself into procedure. "I need verification," he said into a phone. "Yes, we have the case." "No, it has not been opened. The seal appears intact." "I said appears." His voice dropped lower after that. Hayes stayed in the doorway, suddenly stiff, the confidence draining from his posture in slow visible layers. Alicia could see him replaying the morning, not with remorse but with self-protection. The gas station. The phone. The case. His own words. People like you. The body camera on his chest had recorded the phrase in clean digital audio, closer and sharper than any witness memory. Outside, sirens did not announce the arrival of federal authority. There was no dramatic roar. No swarm of agents rushing the doors. What came instead was quieter and far more frightening to men who had mistaken noise for power. 3 black sport utility vehicles rolled into the police lot and parked in a straight line. Their doors opened almost at once. Colonel Richard Vance stepped out first, tall, silver-haired, wearing a dark overcoat over a charcoal suit, his Pentagon credentials clipped neatly to his breast pocket. Behind him came 2 federal agents and a military attorney carrying a slim leather folder. They walked without hurry. That was what made the station go still. People who knew they belonged did not need to rush. The lobby fell silent as they entered. Officers looked up from desks. Conversations ended in the middle of words. The automatic doors slid shut behind them with a soft sigh, and the building seemed smaller than it had 5 minutes earlier. Colonel Vance did not ask where Alicia was. His eyes found the holding room at once, then moved to Hayes, then to Callahan, who had returned from the hallway with his face pale under the fluorescent lights. "Sergeant Mark Callahan?" Vance asked. Callahan nodded. "Colonel, there seems to have been a misunderstanding." Vance placed a sealed document on the front counter. "No. A misunderstanding ends when verification is offered and accepted. This continued after verification was refused." Hayes opened his mouth, but the military attorney looked at him once, and whatever explanation he had prepared dissolved behind his teeth. Vance turned toward the evidence room. "Where is the case?" The young desk officer pointed before Callahan could answer. An evidence technician unlocked the door with hands that were suddenly too careful. Everyone watched as the black case was brought out and placed on a clean table. The red seal was intact. Alicia saw Vance glance at it, and only then did the tight line in his jaw ease by a fraction. He turned to her through the open holding room door. "Miss Monroe, are you injured?" The question was simple, professional, but it carried the first respect she had been given all morning. Alicia stood slowly. "I am able to continue, Colonel." Vance held her gaze for 1 second, long enough to understand what she was not saying. Then he looked back at Hayes. The room did not need shouting. The truth had arrived dressed in paperwork, witnesses, and federal jurisdiction, and it was already louder than anything Hayes had said. The review did not begin like justice in the movies. There was no table slammed, no angry speech, no sudden confession under a bright lamp. It began with a body camera cable plugged into a station computer, and a room full of people forced to listen to the morning exactly as it had happened. Alicia sat at the end of the conference table with a bottle of water in front of her, untouched. Colonel Vance stood behind her left shoulder, arms folded, while the military attorney opened a secure laptop. Hayes sat across from them, no longer leaning back, no longer smiling. Callahan sat beside him with a notepad he had stopped writing on after the first video began. On the screen, the gas station appeared in grainy daylight. Alicia's gray coat. The silver sedan. The black case visible through glass. Then Hayes's voice, clear and casual, asking whether the vehicle was hers. Before there had been any report, any complaint, any verified reason. The room listened as Alicia offered her license. Listened as she offered a verification contact. Listened as Hayes dismissed it. Then came the sentence that changed the air. "You people always have a story." No one moved. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to pull back. Hayes stared at the table. Callahan closed his eyes for half a second, not long enough to be grief, just long enough to be calculation. The military attorney clicked to the next file. Jenna Ortiz's video filled the screen, steadier than anyone expected. From behind the gas station window, it showed Alicia standing still, her hands visible, her voice measured. It showed Hayes raising his voice. It showed Callahan arriving and accepting Hayes's version before asking Alicia a single meaningful question. It showed the phone sliding toward the curb and Alicia reaching for it slowly, carefully, not toward Hayes, not toward the case, not toward danger. Then Hayes's shout filled the room. "Stop resisting." The words sounded different indoors. Smaller. Exposed. Without flashing lights and a uniform to dress them up, They sounded like what they were. A label placed over a woman before the truth could speak. Colonel Vance looked at Hayes. Is that the moment you described as active resistance in your report? Hayes opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. It happened fast. Alicia looked at him for the first time since the review started. It happened on camera. The sentence was quiet, but it landed with more force than anger could have. Callahan leaned forward. Colonel, this was a breakdown in communication. Alicia turned to him. Her wrists were still marked, faint red circles against brown skin, but her voice remained even. A breakdown in communication is when one person does not understand. This continued after I explained, after I offered verification, and after you saw the seal. Callahan's pen rolled off his notepad and tapped against the floor. No one bent to pick it up. The county commander, who had entered 10 minutes earlier with a face full of practiced neutrality, finally spoke. Officer Hayes, Sergeant. Callahan, you are relieved of duty pending formal review. Hayes looked up sharply. Chief, come on. The commander did not soften. Do not speak. 2 words. Plain. Final. For the first time that morning, Hayes was the one ordered into silence. The military attorney slid a document across the table. Federal review will also examine whether restricted property was improperly seized, whether false statements were entered into official records, and whether prior reports involving Officer Hayes require audit. That last word changed Hayes's face completely. Audit. Not just this morning. Not just Alicia. The past opening its locked drawers. Alicia watched him understand that careers rarely collapse from one mistake alone. They collapse when one mistake gives people permission to examine the pattern. Callahan rubbed a hand over his mouth. Miss Monroe, he said finally, not looking directly at her. I regret how this unfolded. The apology arrived too late and too carefully dressed. Alicia studied him for a moment. She thought of her mother's cracked lunch container, her father's pencil circling newspaper stories, the cashier brave enough to record from behind glass, the young desk officer who had quietly given her water. Then she said, regret is not repair. Correct the record. Callahan looked up then. Hayes did too. Alicia did not raise her voice. Every line that says I resisted needs to be removed. Every charge needs to be dismissed. Every report written before the video was reviewed needs to be preserved. And every person stopped by Officer Hayes under the same language deserves a second look. The room stayed silent. Colonel Vance's expression did not change, but something in his eyes softened just slightly. Alicia was not asking for revenge. She was asking for the truth to travel backward and open doors for people who had never reached a phone call powerful enough to be believed. By late afternoon, the sky over Fairfax County had cleared, but the air still felt washed and cold, the kind of cold that made every breath visible before it disappeared. Alicia Monroe stepped out of the station through the same front door she had entered hours earlier, only now. No one guided her, no one spoke over her, and no one called her subject. Her phone had been returned. Her case had been resealed under federal supervision. Her name had been corrected in the system before she left the building. Outside, the gas station video was already in the hands of investigators. The charges were dismissed before they could fully become charges, and Officer Bradley Hayes's badge sat in a plastic tray on the chief's desk while his past reports waited for review. Sergeant Mark Callahan remained inside, answering questions in a room that no longer bent around his rank. Alicia did not look back immediately. She stood at the edge of the sidewalk with the black case beside her, feeling the weight of the morning settle into her shoulders. Colonel Vance waited a few feet away near one of the black sport utility vehicles, speaking quietly with the military attorney. When he finished, he walked over and handed Alicia a fresh paper cup of coffee from the station lobby. It is terrible, he said. But it is hot. For the first time all day, Alicia almost smiled. That is more than I expected from this building. Vance looked at her wrists. The marks had faded but not vanished. You should get those documented. I will. And you do not have to continue today. Alicia looked across the parking lot, past the cruisers, past the flag moving slowly against the pale sky, toward the road that led back to Washington. 30 miles. Maybe 40 with traffic. The meeting had been delayed, not canceled. The package was secure again. The work still mattered. She thought of all the people who never got a colonel on the phone, All the names buried under neat words like obstruction, resisting, suspicious, non-compliant. She thought of how many stories had been written too quickly by people who knew the first report often became the final truth. "Yes," she said softly. "I do." Vance did not argue. He only nodded, the way soldiers nod when they understand duty without needing it explained. Across the lot, Hayes stood near the side entrance with his jacket folded over one arm. Without the badge, he looked smaller, not harmless, not forgiven, just smaller. His eyes met Alicia's for a second and then dropped away. He did not apologize. Maybe he could not. Maybe the kind of apology required would have had to reach farther back than that morning. Farther than one case, one report, one woman he had misread because he never believed he had to read carefully. Alicia did not walk toward him. She did not need to. Justice was already moving, quiet and administrative, through files, cameras, signatures, and questions that would not disappear when the lights went off. Jenna Ortiz stood by the gas station across the street, wrapped in a green employee jacket, watching from beside the pumps. Alicia noticed her and gave a small nod. Jenna returned it with both hands wrapped around her phone, her face nervous but proud. It was not a celebration. It was recognition. One woman had stayed calm. Another had pressed record. Somewhere between them, the truth had survived long enough to be heard. Alicia lifted the black case into the back of the sport utility vehicle and climbed in. As the door closed, her phone vibrated in her palm. A message from the secure channel appeared on the crack screen. Package received for transfer. Internal reviews initiated. Careers under examination. Alicia read it once, then turned the screen dark. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, passing the station, the lowered flags, the windows where faces quickly looked down. Sunlight broke through the clouds and slipped across her hands, across the faint circles on her wrists, across the silver cross resting beneath her coat. She leaned back and let the warmth touch her skin. No music rose. No crowd cheered. No one said she had won. The road simply opened in front of her, and Alicia Monroe kept moving, carrying the truth with both hands, quieter than revenge and stronger than fear.